Hi, I'm Laura and this is tropetrinitytrilogy, and today I'll be reviewing Phoenix by Emily Luke, also known as my fellow AuthorTuber Julian Greystoke, which I will probably refer to as just by habit. So Julian is a friend, and her YouTube channel has some great content, including well thought out analytical book reviews and sassy hilarious read-along, which I highly recommend. However, my opinion of her and her channel will have no effect on my review of this book. I would also like to add that I won this book in a giveaway that she hosted on her channel, so I got it for free. And if you would like to see what this book looked like before I gave it a bunch of dents, you should check out that video down below, which I also got a sticker she made from her Redbubble, which you'll be able to see if you watch that video. And I also would like to add, I later on bought this mug from her Redbubble, which is now filled with chocolate milk. I didn't realize till recently, but the cat on the mug looks like my cat. See? See, it's like they're the same. Oh, he's passed out. Oh, his head's slumping. Okay, I'll put you back on the bed. So, let's get into the review. There will be 3 parts to this review. My objective intro to the book, my subjective quick review of the book, and then third, a more in-depth but still spoiler-free analysis of this book. Let's start with part 1, the intro. So I'm going to read the back of this book because this book's back blurb is pretty good. Deidre Fleming lives a small town life. Her only concerns are high school, family, and getting her yearly vaccine for the sleeping virus. Everything is under control. Deidre's ordinary life is ripped to shreds when the virus mutates and changes previously harmless patients into horrifying monsters. Deidre must face this new world, one without parents, without anyone to come to her rescue, as she bands together with a group of teens and children, including an intimidating leader, an attractive best friend, a little boy with many secrets, and a kind goth boy. Deidre has only ever been a face in the crowd, but now she must rise from the ashes, fight back, and become a leader. Ta-da! So that's the blurb. So, in short, this book is a YA coming-of-age story about a social outcast in the zombie apocalypse. It is definitely within the YA perspective. However, I wouldn't say it's cringy or cheesy as a lot of YA teeters on or straight up is. It feels like an actual teenager as opposed to a soap opera like many YA books do. This book is written in a close third person limited to DJ's point of view, which as someone who likes being in the protagonist's head, I really enjoyed this. First, I'd like to say the formatting of this book is a bit unusual. So to show you what it looks like, so you can see the paragraphs aren't indented in this book, and there's also a full large space between each paragraph, which is more similar to what Wattpad books are formatted like as opposed to an actual novel. However, this didn't affect how easy the book was to read, so it does not affect my rating. It just makes the book seem a little less professional. Along with that, the book doesn't have the page numbers, and as someone who obsessively likes to know the page I'm on and the page I'll end on, I wrote the page number in the corner of the corner of every single page before I even read it. Which again, this will not affect my rating, but it's a bit weird. So if that's something that really bothers you, that might be a reason to pick up the ebook instead of the physical book, because the page numbers, I wrote them all in. But for anyone wondering who did get the book, it is 151 pages. 151, making it a novella. Also be warned that this book has a couple typos and grammar errors, and unlike the formatting, this does affect my rating. Overall, the writing had some things I liked, but it also had some flaws, kind of making it even out to okay. Now, I will note I have read Julian Greystoke's later stories, and her writing has improved a lot. But for this one, it's flawed. And if you're someone who wants to try out the zombie genre, but you're kind of on the fence, this is definitely a good start. It's very character oriented, and the zombies don't overtake the characters. It's very focused on her internal struggle, her change, and the people as individuals. And again, it's a short book, so it's a great way to dip your toes into the zombie genre. And it's also a great story to pick up if you want to read well-written characters, but you don't want to read a massive book. This is a quick adventure with them that has a full arc for the protagonist. However, I would also like to add, if you do like zombies, this will get your zombie fix, so don't worry. Anyway, for part 2, my review. So for this review, I have 7 main points I would like to make. Number 1, Deidre is a good protagonist who is actually flawed. She's relatable while also being a distinct individual. With a strong character arc. However, I will note, I do wish the character arc was a bit more evenly spaced throughout the book, because it feels a little bit like it plateaus at one point and then spikes. So that's a little note. I prefer a more even arc instead of that. Number 2, the writing style did have some good things. I enjoyed how in Deidre's head the narration was, and how her personality bled through into the writing and choices of analogies and things such as that. That being said, the writing had a tendency to show things very effectively, which is good, but then it would proceed to tell the reader the same thing that it had already shown us several times. And this was unnecessary, because it was already very clear what was being said, and this comes across as not trusting her own writing to show readers things, and it feels very repetitive and unnecessary. Number 3, the setup of the sleeping virus and its integration into the pre-apocalyptic society was very realistic and well done. It was 100% believable, and I could see this happening to us if a zombie virus did integrate into our society. Number 4, the characters were well-rounded and realistic, and they all had really strong introductions into the story. They felt like real people I actually would have went to school with. I really enjoyed every single scene in which they interacted, and several of them felt like they could be the protagonist of their own story. However, I do feel that their distrust of people was a bit too strong, too quick into the apocalypse, like it was trying to get to the more edgy, dark version of the apocalypse where people can't trust each other, but it was really quick into it, and I feel like they should have still been at the stage where they're trying to band together and get as many survivors as possible, as opposed to being like, why should you join our group? It was a little too quick for me. Also, I would like to add, I did love every single character interaction I read, but I do wish there was a bit more of them, especially around the midpoint. Number 5, there's an adorable dog named Chief who is useful in the apocalypse, but he also doesn't feel like some amazing dog stereotype. He actually feels like a real pet someone could have. This is something the story does very well. Everyone feels like they could be real, even the dog, who is adorable. So if you're a dog lover, there's a dog. Number 6, I really enjoyed the romance in the story. It's a small aspect, it doesn't overtake the plot, which is nice, and also there's 2 of them. There was a successful and failed one, both of which I really enjoyed. The successful one was a cute little first love story, whereas the failed one made the story feel more realistic, and in some ways deconstructed some YA tropes about always having to be with the most attractive person, always ending up with your first love. It was really nice how this story portrayed a romance between 2 people who aren't the most beautiful people, and it made it feel more real, and how you don't always have to end up with the first person. And finally, number 7. This book gets surprisingly dark and ruthless at times. The beginning of this book left me shocked. Like, I was out loud shocked. Like, oh my gosh, what is happening? I didn't see this. And there were times later in this book where I really empathized with Deidre. I was shocked when she was shocked. I was sad when she was sad. And I felt triumphant when she was triumphant. The emotional beats of this story were very well done, and they made the moments of Deidre's character arc really pack a punch. That being said, here are my thoughts on each act. Act 1 was a great, intense intro, and I really have no critique of it. I was able to understand every character immediately, and it also established the world in a really immersive, realistic, and brutal way that both shocked me and made the high stakes very real. Act 2 had some good and some bad. Every single in-depth scene of action and character interactions was great and I really enjoyed them. However, I will say that I feel it does spend a bit too much time in Deidre's head and it could have used a couple more scenes. Also, the scenes I did get, I feel like that is when Deidre's character arc plateaus. I feel like this act could have further developed her arc more effectively, and it could have also further developed character relationships effectively if there had been a couple more scenes or if the scenes had been tweaked a bit to add those details. However, once the book reached Act 3 and the climax, it went full speed intense with an awesome ending. Though I will say Deidre's character arc did feel a bit rushed in this act. Overall, I enjoyed this book. The main negative is the writing. It had typos, it was repetitive, and it didn't feel that polished. Also, I do wish I had gotten a bit more character interaction scenes and a bit more of Deidre's character development in those scenes, which this is a novella, so I'm not asking the book to become a lot longer. However, if the repetitive parts of the narrative had been cut out, it could have easily added in several short scenes or expanded on several of the scenes to add these details without adding to the page count. The positives of this story is the immersiveness and the believability of this world. This didn't feel like some far-off zombie apocalypse that could never happen. This felt like something that could happen and I could imagine myself being in. The characters were well-rounded and felt like actual people I would have went to high school with, and I loved every single character interaction I read. Also, I really liked the failed romance aspect of this story. It felt like a nice touch of reality that a lot of YA romance lacks. The truth is, this is a fun story, but it feels like it needs one more round of story edits and one more round of prose edits. It'd be a great draft, but it doesn't feel like a final product. The prose are below average, the world and plot are about average, and the characters are above average, resulting in this book rounding to be about average. If you can't get past flawed prose, then this isn't the book for you. However, I definitely recommend this story for people looking for well-rounded characters, especially if you're awkward and have trouble making friends, because I know I really was in middle school and still am to an extent, and Deidre felt like a realistic and true to form representation of that. I found her really relatable, and she didn't feel like the cliche awkward YA protagonist who is actually secretly amazing and good looking at everything. She actually did feel like a pretty accurate representation of my awkward middle schoolness. I mean, she's in high school, but we all have different years when we're awkward. Mine was majoritively middle school. Also, there's a cute dog. Just saying. So, despite the story's flaws, I really did enjoy the characters, and having read Julian's later writing, which I will say she's improved a lot when it comes to prose, I am definitely going to pick up her other stories, because if there's one thing I'm certain of, it's that I really like how she writes characters. Anyway, let's get into the analysis. I will be giving vague details of things, but there will be no direct spoilers. So first, I would like to give an in-text example of both something I really enjoyed about the writing and the repetitiveness. I think this is not only a good example of both the good and bad in this writing, but I also think it's good writing advice. So first, I'd like to establish this excerpt includes the characters Deidre, the protagonist, Andy, her ex-childhood best friend who is a popular kid, and Moth, a goth kid that she just met. At this point in the story, we know everything I just said about the characters. The apocalypse has just started, and Andy just said they need to go someplace safe. So let's get to the quote. This is at the bottom of page 31. "Like where?" asked Moth. If he had been stronger, his tone might have had an edge to it. Deidre could tell he disliked Andy, just as Andy didn't seem overly fond of him. Deidre looked at the two young men. Different as they could be, Andy with his healthy tan and maturing masculine figure, his hair was blonde and managed to look great even full of sweat and flecked with blood. His face still retained its youth and vibrancy, pale as it was with pain and loss of blood. Moth looked skeletal when compared with Andy. They certainly ran in different social circles. They may have even disliked each other from a distance for a long time. Certainly they weren't thrilled about one another now. They reminded Deidre of two dominant dogs, eyeing one another to see which would win in a fight. So while reading this directly, the prose sound good. I like the sentences. It's nice writing, and I especially like the analogy about the two reminding Deidre of dominant dogs, because this reflects how she's an animal lover, and this is something I really like. Deidre is clearly made out to be an animal lover without it ever being directly told to the reader. The fact that she has a pet dog that she loves and cares for, and the fact that she constantly paints her worldview with analogies of things reminding her of animals makes it clear she's an animal lover. However, while the story clearly shows this to the reader without saying it, it doesn't appear to trust itself when it comes to different aspects. My issue is this paragraph kind of restates multiple times how Andy and Moth are different, they're from different social circles, and they don't particularly like each other. Which each individual sentence in itself is fine, but saying them multiple times isn't necessary. Since it's already been made clear to the reader that Andy is popular and Moth is a goth kid, we really don't need to be told they ran in different social circles, they're very different people. We already know this. And while it is effective to describe two characters by comparing them, since we already know what Moth looks like, this feels a bit repetitive. And we already know that they're very different, so again, it's a bit repetitive. Though I will say I like knowing what characters look like, so I'm not upset that I know what Andy looks like. But the fact that it says that Moth disliked Andy and Andy wasn't overly fond of him, and then it says they're different as could be, they clearly ran in different social circles, Moth looks skeletal in comparison, they certainly weren't thrilled about one another, and then the dog analogy happened. That's so many times that it's saying the same thing over and over, which again is repetitive, and I realize I'm being repetitive in my explanation, so I'll move on. But the point is, I think I might have even liked it better if it said, like where, asked Moth. If he had been stronger, his tone might have had an edge to it. They reminded Deidre of two dominant dogs, eyeing one another to see which would win a fight. Now again, this might be cutting out too much, and I didn't want to change anything, but the point is that this story tends to show very effectively and then tell, and then tell, and then tell, and it gets a bit repetitive at times, and I feel that the extra words added by this could have been better spent with scenes showing more character interactions and showing more of Deidre's character development and the development of relationships. That being said, this quote also demonstrates how Deidre has a really strong voice. I could tell she was a socially anxious person based on her thoughts in every situation. She tended to freeze up when in danger, which made her feel more like a real teenage girl as opposed to some amazing YA chosen one protagonist. I've noticed while reading a lot of books that the world and the characters are all biased towards the protagonist. I can tell that this book is written by someone biased towards the protagonist, but while reading this, I never felt like that. Deidre wasn't the most amazing person ever, and the world didn't change for her. My only issue is that it felt like her character arc plateaued around Act 2 and then skyrocketed in Act 3. And I feel the story would have benefited from either having more scenes between the plateau and the skyrocket that demonstrate Deidre's character arc and her development, or if the scenes that were in the plateau section had been tweaked to show better development. This was especially obvious when it came to Deidre's fighting ability, which went from 0 to 100 in literally one scene. However, I will say this book does keep action to a minimum, so it wasn't really a big focus. If this was a very fight-oriented book, that would have been an issue, but since this book isn't about the fighting, that isn't as big of a deal. Also, there is one character who becomes friends with Deidre despite only saying 3 sentences to Deidre that I'm not even sure if Deidre really responds to her. And then this character proceeds to trust Deidre over everyone else for what to me seems like no apparent reason. That relationship specifically needed developing more. That being said, this story has so many great side characters. Andy, Moth, DS, Spook, and Quick all felt like they could have been protagonists of their own story. They were well-rounded, nuanced, and we got to see the best and worst of every character. I also loved every single interaction Deidre had with these characters. And my only critique is I would have loved to see more of their interactions because I really loved reading them. Also, this book has a small romantic subplot which I really enjoyed. There are 2 of them, a successful romance and a failed romance. I thought the successful romance had an adorable setup that made me go, "Aw, kids in their first love." It was sweet and innocent, and I did appreciate how it was between 2 unconventionally attractive people. Having attractive leads is perfectly fine, but it's nice to see average looking people find love, especially in books because you can't even see the people, so I don't know why every character needs to be the most good looking. because I'm not even looking at them. And this is especially true when it comes to love interest, because a lot of books do say that the main character is average looking, but then the love interest always has to be a six-pack Adonis or a drop-dead gorgeous Aphrodite, and it's kind of unrealistic. So it's kind of refreshing to have a romance where the first scene the protagonist sees the love interest, she isn't thinking how hot he is. Then when it comes to the failed romance, in some ways I liked it even more. It genuinely made me sad, but I wasn't even rooting for them. It wasn't like I was sad that it didn't succeed. I just felt sad because the protagonist felt sad, and I empathized with her so strongly. Her confusion and upsetness, is upsetness a word? Whatever. Her confusion and upsetness was both relatable and added a sense of realism to the story. I was genuinely sad, and despite never having been in that same situation, I felt like I was in that situation. It was almost a deconstruction of how many books depict first romances. A lot of YA books depict girls ending up with the hottest guy and their first kiss, their first love, their first everything, and it was nice to see a book where that isn't the case. Just because someone is hot, likes you, and even is nice to you doesn't mean you'll make a good romantic couple. And that's okay. That's nothing wrong with them, and there's nothing wrong with you, just not everyone meshes together like that. And also, to an extent, it felt like Deidre was learning that lesson alongside the reader. Like, she was thinking, oh, it has to be this way, and then it turned out not to be that way. But that's more of like a subtext thing than it actually saying that. I just felt like that. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. But it was nice because it felt like Deidre had also ended up romanticizing first kiss, first love, and this was her realizing that's not always the case. In fact, there were many times in the story where I felt what Deidre felt. A lot of the emotional punches in this story were really well done. I was shocked and distraught when she was, and I felt triumphant alongside her. The brutality of some of the scenes was really impactful and made me go, oh crap, out loud several times. So despite this story's flawed prose and structural flaws, overall, this story succeeded in making me empathize with the characters, especially the protagonist, and delivering its emotional punches. And I definitely plan on reading Julian's later books because I love her characters. Also, I honestly think that you should check out this book or any of Julian's writing if you want to read about characters that feel like real people with real fears and anxieties and aren't just the amazing protagonist, because I've consistently found her characters to be relatable and to have a lot of flaws and fears that I do. So definitely think that you should check her out for the characters because she's good at that. I really enjoy that. Anyway, that's my review. If you have any questions, thoughts, or if you've read this book and you have any thoughts, whether you agree or disagree with me, I'd love to hear them down below. Also, Julian's channel is 5 stars, so I definitely recommend you check it out, especially if you love in-depth analytical reviews like this one. Anyway, that's all I have to say for now, so thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.